Uta here of TransWidow, Uta Hagen YouTube channel, and Uta Hagen Grass Widow.wordpress.blog, .wordpress.com blog, where you can find links and articles with my comments and things like that. So that's utahagengrasswidow.wordpress.com. Please do continue to like and share and subscribe here. We now have, at this point, 1,586 subscribers. And so we're close to 1,600. And congratulations to all of us. And thank you to new subscribers as well as my old stalwarts and my loyal stalwarts. And this is a cutting from my asparagus fern, which I put outside in the summer in a shady place. And it's this year it did something that I've never had it do before. It grew up one long frond way up into the rows of Sharon tree that it was underneath. And I just trimmed it. It's got to get trimmed back, in the winter. But I'm going to enjoy the greens now that I don't have any more flowers. We had a little light snow. I woke up to light snow on the ground this morning. Oh, and I'm wearing my hat for a reason. I'm just going to show you a little selection, not all of them, of the hats that I knitted for the charity project. I do this when I'm traveling to go see my Claes, who is successfully, this one is too small for me to put on. It's a children's hat made of different colors because it was leftover scraps. This one is too big. I feel like Goldilocks with all the chairs and the bowls. Yes, because people have different sizes heads, and my friend John is going to be so happy to sell these and donate the money to that charity, that local charity. And let's see, this one is sort of small. You could call this maybe another child hat. I don't know. And then this one has kind of a story because this yarn is so old. It's 30 years old. It's left over. Nettie, see, had learned to knit from his mother, and many men learn to knit, and in Scandinavia, many men knit. And then there's that guy, whatever his name is, who made knitting kind of popular. And I can't think of it now. And so men knit without needing to become women. And I've understood that there's no point in my doing some knitting classes or a knitting club or anything for women because you can't avoid the men like Nettie in these places. They particularly need to gather narcissistic fuel in groups where women are doing our bonding sisterhood activities. But this is really an update on Juliet, who found out, it's almost a year ago, by her husband bringing her his laptop when she was just getting to sleep on a Sunday night after a weekend when their child, who was then maybe about 2, was had a difficult teething weekend, and she hadn't gotten much sleep. And so what does this guy that we've been calling him Jack, he doesn't call himself Jack, he's given himself a flowery name, but we call him Jack. And he brought the letter to her on his computer, and it explained a lot about his recent behavior. Another couple of details about him are that he works in tech. He might have some symptoms of autism spectrum, and that's what it sounds like to me. And let's see. Oh, yeah, he tried to choke her, and she had to call the police. That is one of the choking incidents where the police were called. There were at least two of those where the police were called. There were some choking incidents where the police were not called in our data from 54 trans widows. And he also threw her, he pushed her down during an argument where the baby was in the room. In both of these violent incidents, the baby was in the room and as a very young infant. So, we need to keep all of these details together. Because we have a story to tell, and I just want to remind you that you can find me and many other trans widows telling little bits of our stories at Lime Soda Films YouTube channel. That's Vaishnavi Sundar. In her documentary profiling 18 of us, which is called Behind the Looking Glass. There are also, if you look on, for example, my community page, my community messages, you will find several links to interviews that she's had recently. And I really am hoping that within the next month or so, that Behind the Looking Glass will come out. I think it would be very timely. And I want to point out that there was a quite numerous kerfuffles in Congress. I think it was yesterday about men in women's sports. And Riley Gaines was there defending women. And we also have trailers coming up on various threads of this Daily Wire film called Lady Ballers. And I've been watching the responses to it. And this has been interesting because this Days of Girlhood thing that the comedian Tyler Fisher sort of acted out in that Lady Ballers film is it's true enough to be totally hilarious. And he must have gathered some details from some of the ex-wives like me, because he says something like, oh, and I reread Sense and Sensibility. And it's like, yes, Nettie, my ex, went through a Jane Austen phase just as we were going through the divorce, which is just so strange. I think that these guys believe that they can transform the interior of their psyche into a female psyche if they know Jane Austen. Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Northanger Abbey, I think is the other one, if you know them by heart. And, yeah. I can't imagine what Jane Austen would say, actually, about all of that. Anyway, but back to Juliet. I invite you to kind of scroll back through the Trans Widows Testimonies playlist, and you can find this is probably the fourth one I've done on the evolving story. The legal process of the divorce is almost through. They have separated the property or the assets and stuff. And I'm glad to say that although he was a profligate spender and he spent a whole lot of money that she found out about during the case of the divorce, there was some assets that she got. I'm very happy about that. And one thing that, if I have one regret, it's that I could perhaps have spent some of the financial settlement that I got in my 1990s divorce. I feel like I should have spent it on some really good guys to do tutoring for my sons. Math tutoring, maybe some language tutoring. Um, I could have invented something that they, kind of even some sport or something to just hire really good guys because I was far away from my family. My father was a great influence, and their uncles were good to them mostly. But I really, uh, there wasn't anything in the end that was real consistent. And I think my sons really needed um, strong, stable, kind, compassionate male um, influences, male sort of companions, older brother types. I really, I thought I was doing enough of it. They often did get assigned to the classes of the male teachers, but I think that I could have done some things to help them with feeling stable, feeling loved, because that's what happens. Like this is happening with this 3-year-old child of Juliet's. The child one time didn't recognize the father when he came to pick the kid up because the father is actively changing his appearance and is actively wearing sometimes very overtly sort of sexualized outfits, sort of dressing provocatively, which is most women don't do that when they're picking up their kid from nursery school. Jack has a younger guy who's just like himself, in other words, a younger cross-dresser, that he's kind of supporting, I guess. And one of the things that I just wanted to bring up about what's she told me is recently happening is that he and the lover, Jack and Jack's lover, bought a house very uncomfortably close to the place where Juliet has been living with her son. And because she does have, some settlement from this divorce, she had the wherewithal to move to a different place. And now that guy already purchased it. He's in a mortgage and stuff like that. And so now she's given herself some space. And this is really, really important. I was stalked by Nettie at the beginning of the divorce. He would suddenly show up at 7:30 in the morning at the apartment and insist on being the one to take our kids to school. And women in my shoes might think at first, or other people might think at first, that this is being helpful. Okay, you'll do this thing for me. I'm overstressed. I'm working 3 jobs and stuff like that. But what they do then is they document this and they start usurping your motherhood. And what Nettie did was he used that in court, and he pretended that he had spent the entire day with the children. And I just, kind of caught on to this back in 1994 when this was starting to happen, or actually it was 1995. And I actually started waking us all up earlier, getting less sleep myself, going over to either a friend's house with some egg sandwiches for breakfast, and then going in helping my girlfriend who had children and taking all of the children to school then. But I had to actually get out of my apartment so that when he came and rang the buzzer, he would somehow come into the building. He probably kept his key to the outside door or something, and then then he's suddenly banging on the door. It's very confusing for these little kids. And all of this is enabled and sanctioned by these gender therapists who will not admit that the child is being traumatized and damaged, not to mention the trans widow. And I will actually bring up the testimony yesterday in Congress of Riley Gaines, and she talked about being traumatized in the locker room where she felt uncomfortable because Leah Thomas, Will Thomas was in there, being a male and claiming in words in that he's a female, and the trauma is denied, and the entitlement of a man making this claim and inserting himself into the women's space to change and to shower and so on, that all is being sanctioned and enabled by these so-called gender therapists who have an agenda. They are not really scientists of psychology, because what they do is prioritize these dudes, these netties, over women and children. And we're seeing enough of that. We're seeing just enough of that. Now, there's beginning to be this problem with Juliet's in-laws, which I witnessed almost exactly the same. They are being exposed to the propaganda. I know that my ex-in-laws had phone therapy with Dr. Connie, and they are then brainwashed, and they become actually very nasty, to the mother of the children. They are sort of trained into it. At first, they might feel some kind of sympathy for you, but this was something that was quite pronounced, and they were quite political. And it's very interesting now, because I actually snooped a little bit on my ex-mother-in-law's Facebook, and for some reason she doesn't mention her son who thinks he's a daughter, and she doesn't mention our grandsons at all. She only talks about her other children and her other grandchildren and the one great granddaughter, I think, that she has. And I believe that it could very well be that Nettie stiffed her. I believe that Nettie borrowed money for all the operations and so on, which were in 1996. And and so the insurance wasn't paying for it at that time. And I think that, he made a promise that was a loan, and I don't think that he's paying her back. And, he's a tech executive and owns an apartment in Brooklyn worth $3 million, completely paid off. But I'm only bringing this up, not to bring the focus back to me, but to bring the focus back to the patterns that evolve. And I think we need to make a whole new line of therapy that is for the traumatized families, the siblings, the ex-wives, the trans widows, and the trans orphans, the children of, because the ramifications are actually quite extreme. So I'm very proud of Juliette, because she is figuring out how to move away and create some distance, and that's actually really important. This child, isn't able to actually recognize his father, and my older son was older. My younger son, I maybe, I think, Nettie never wore a wig that I knew of. And so I think my children saw their father still as their father. He was still, he had distinctive facial structure, and they still recognized him, but I can really understand how frightening this could be for a very young child who this this person is now saying, "I know you and I'm mama something and you have to come with me." And there was one case where another one where the police got called because the child didn't want to go with that person. And uh, then it's tricky. They had to call the mother and call the police. And and then the other latest thing with Juliet is that Jack, who is calling himself Mama something, is giving up the times. If this 3-year-old is saying, "Mama, I don't want to go. I want to stay with you," then he's kind of given up. Now, Nettie would have fought tooth and nail and found a way to blame me. I think that um, there is an understanding that, you know, somehow Jack is understanding that he doesn't want to fight that battle. He doesn't want to deal with a crying child. So we all just have to keep on keeping on. And please do get in touch with me to fill out my 20 questions to ask a trans widow. You can do that at the contact form at utahagengrasswidow.wordpress.com. I'll put that in the description. Be well, connect with nature, and thank you.